Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're not just looking at a business book. We are, I think, conducting a full-scale autopsy on the very idea of success.
That's a good way to put it.
We're tearing apart a text that, quite frankly, changed the vocabulary of management for the last, 25 years? We are looking at Jim Collins' Good to Great.
The Physics of Sustained Excellence.
Yeah.
It's a classic for a reason, and I am genuinely excited to unpack this one. It's one of those books that it gets referenced so much, but the core ideas often get a little lost.
They really do. And I want to warn you, our listeners, right up front. If you think you know this book because you've heard the phrase, get the right people on the bus, or, you've seen a diagram of a hedgehog in a PowerPoint presentation somewhere.
Chuckles, which everyone has.
Everyone has, right? You probably don't actually know this book. The cultural osmosis of Good to Great has really watered down just how radical and, frankly, how strange the findings were at the time.
Yeah.
When you go back to the raw data, and we have it right here in front of us, it's just shocking how much of it runs completely contrary to the way we think we should run companies and even our own careers today.
It really is a book about how wrong our intuition usually is. We think we know what makes a winner. We've got these built-in assumptions.
Absolutely.
We think it's charisma or a single killer strategy or, some radical new technology that comes out of nowhere. And Collins' data just strips all of that away and replaces it with something much quieter and much more powerful.
Quieter is the perfect word for it. But before we get into the mechanics of it all, the flywheels and the doom loops, and yes, even rinsing cottage cheese, we have to start with the origin story.
We have to.
Because this massive 5-year study didn't start with a neat hypothesis. It didn't start with Collins wondering how to write a bestseller. It started with an insult.
Very polite, very well-reasoned, and utterly devastating insult.
Right. Set the scene for us, because I think this context is so important for understanding the why behind the whole project.
Okay, so picture this. It's 1996. Jim Collins is, he's feeling pretty good about himself, and he should be. He's just published his previous book, Build to Last, which was a monster bestseller.
Everybody was reading it.
Everybody. It was the business book to have on your shelf. So he's at this dinner in San Francisco with a bunch of, big thinkers, and sitting there is a man named Bill Meehan. Now, Meehan wasn't just anybody. He was the managing director of the San Francisco office of McKinsey & Company.
Okay, so a very serious player. The kind of guy you really want to impress. You want his approval.
Exactly. The ultimate seal of approval. And Meehan leads over to Collins very casually and says something to the effect of, Jim, we love Built to Last around here. You and your co-author did a very fine job on the research and writing.
Okay, start off nice.
Unfortunately, he says, it's useless.
Useless. Wow. That is a word that echoes. Just imagine you're at the peak of your success and someone this credible tells you your masterpiece is useless.
It's a total gut punch. But Collins, to his immense credit, he doesn't get defensive. He doesn't argue. He just asks why.
And that why is the key.
It's the key to everything. And Meehan's explanation is the spark for this entire deep dive. He said, basically, the companies you wrote about in Built to Last were, for the most part, always great. Think about it. They had these visionary founders, David Packard at HP, a Walt Disney at Disney.
They had great parents, essentially. They were born into greatness.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Meehan's point was that the book didn't speak to the vast majority of companies out there. Most companies don't have Walt Disney as a founder. Most companies wake up halfway through their life, they look in the mirror and they realize they're just good. They're mediocre. They're average.
So Meehan's challenge was, it's easy to stay great if you start great, but what about the rest of us? What if you're just, okay, is the disease of just being good incurable?
That's the question. Can a company that has been plodding along, with completely average, uninspired results for decades, suddenly grab the wheel, turn it hard, and become an absolute world beater? And not just for a lucky quarter or a good year, but for a sustained 15-year period.
Is greatness something you're born with, or is it something you can actually build from the ground up with what you already have?
That is the central question of this book, and is what we're going to try and answer today.
And when Collins and his team decided to answer this, they didn't just, look at a few anecdotes or interview some famous CEOs. I mean, reading about the research process for this, it sounds less like writing a book and more like a military operation.
Oh, absolutely. They called it the death march of financial analysis, and I think that's probably underselling it.
Right.
It was a massive undertaking. And we have to spend a minute on the rigor here, because if you don't understand the methodology, the findings just sound like, nice opinions or Pop psychology.
This is what separates it from so many other business books. It's not based on a feeling.
Not at all. This was empirical deduction. They started with a massive pool. Every company that had ever made the Fortune 500 list. That was 1,435 companies.
The entire universe, basically.
The entire universe. And from that universe, they were looking for a very specific, very rare pattern, a very clear signature of transformation.
Okay, so what was the filter? What did a company have to do to even be considered?
It was a two-part test. First, they had to have 15 years of cumulative stock returns at or below the general stock market.
So 15 years of being thoroughly, undeniably mediocre. That's the good phase, or honestly, the blah phase.
The blah phase is perfect, just treading water. Then there had to be a distinct transition point, a pivot. And following that transition, they had to show cumulative returns of at least 3 times the market for the next 15 years.
Okay, hold on. 3 times the market for 15 years straight. That is an incredibly high bar.
It's an enormous bar. To put that number in perspective for you, let's look at one of the most celebrated companies of that era. General Electric, under Jack Welch.
Welch was basically the god of management in the late 90s. GE was the absolute gold standard.
He was. And between 1985 and 2000, GE outperformed the general market by 2.8 times. An incredible performance.
So the bar for entry into this study was essentially you have to do better than peak Jack Welch.
Exactly. And the 11 companies that made the final cut, companies like Abbott, Kimberly-Clark, Walgreens, they didn't just beat them, they blew them out of the water.
By how much?
On average, the good to great companies returned 6.9 times the general market over those 15 years.
Wow. Okay, so this isn't just about getting a little bit better. These companies became, for a time, complete statistical anomalies. They were in a different league.
A completely different universe. The book gives this one hypothetical that just floors me every time I read it. If you had invested $1 in a mutual fund of these good to great companies back in 1965,
Right.
and you just held it until the year 2000, that single dollar would have turned into $471.
$471. And what if you just put that dollar in the general market fund?
You'd have $56.
$56 versus 471. That is the magnitude of the difference we are trying to understand. That is the prize on the table today.
But here's the most important part of the research method, and this is so critical for you to grasp. They didn't just study the 11 winners.
Right, because if you only study winners, you fall into all sorts of cognitive biases.
You fall into selection bias. It's the classic, all billionaires wake up at 5 a.m., so waking up at 5 a.m. must make you a billionaire. It doesn't work that way.
You need a control group. You need to know if the non-billionaires also wake up at 5 a.m.
Exactly. So Collins and his team used a concept called the dogs that did not bark. It's a Sherlock Holmes reference. It means paying attention to what didn't happen.
Okay, so how did they apply that?
For every single one of the 11 good to great companies, they painstakingly selected a comparison company. This was a company in the exact same industry, with roughly the same resources, facing the same opportunities at the exact same time, but one that failed to make the leap. It just stayed good.
So, for example, you have Walgreens, which made the leap and became this rocket ship of success.
And you compare them to Eckerd Drugs, another massive drugstore chain that had all the same market conditions but just didn't make the leap. They stayed mediocre and eventually got bought out.
And that's how you isolate the variables, because if you see Walgreens had a strategy, well, guess what? Eckerd had a strategy too.
Eckerd had smart people too.
Yeah.
So you can't say smart people or strategy is the answer. You have to look for the variables that are different between the two. The things that the winners did, that the losers did not, that is how you isolate the cause. That's how you crack the code.
Okay, so that is our mission today. We are going to try and crack open that black box. We have these 11 companies that went from blah to world beaters. What happened inside the box? What were the inputs that created that massive output?
And Collins breaks it down into a framework, which is really helpful. It's a sequence. There are 3 broad stages, and that's how we're going to structure our deep dive. Stage 1 is disciplined people. Stage 2 is disciplined thought. And stage 3 is disciplined action. It's a progression. You can't skip steps.
People, then thought, then action. All right, let's do it. Let's start with stage 1. Disciplined people. And I think this is where the first really big shock to the system comes in.
Right out of the gate.
Because if I asked a room full of people, how do you turn around a struggling company? God, the Hollywood answer is so obvious. You hire a celebrity CEO.
Right. You get Chainsaw Al Dunlap, you get Lee Iacocca, you get the larger-than-life, charismatic savior who rides in on a white horse, fires a bunch of people, gives a big, inspiring speech, and single-handedly saves the day.
We are conditioned by media, well, everything, to believe that great results require a great man, a
Yeah.
hero.
That's the movie version. It's dramatic, it's simple, and the data says it is dead wrong.
Not just a little wrong.
In fact, Carnan's team found a negative correlation between hiring a high-profile celebrity leader from the outside and taking a company from good to great.
Hold on. A negative correlation. So bringing in that celebrity CEO is actually more likely to hurt your chances than help them.
That's what the data showed. The comparison companies, the ones that failed, were 6 times more likely to have a big-name CEO from the outside. The good to great companies, almost all of them, promoted from within.
Why do you think that is? What's the problem with the celebrity?
Well, the hypothesis is that often they focus on themselves, not the company. Their ambition is for their own brand, their own legacy. It's about being on the cover of Fortune. Instead, what the research team found in every single one of the good to great companies was a very specific, very different kind of leader. Collins calls them level 5 leaders.
Level 5. Okay, so that implies there are levels 1 through 4. We should probably quickly define those.
Right. It's a hierarchy. Level 1 is a highly capable individual. They make productive contributions. Level 2 is a contributing team member. Level 3 is a competent manager. They organize people toward objectives.
Okay, that all sounds pretty standard.
Level 4 is what most of us think of as a great leader. It's an effective leader, someone who can catalyze commitment to a clear, compelling vision and stimulate high performance. Most celebrity CEOs live at level 4. They're very effective.
But level 5 is something else entirely. It's a different species.
It is. A level 5 leader is defined by a really paradoxical blend of 2 seemingly contradictory traits: intense professional will and extreme personal humility.
Humility and will. See, those feel like opposites. Usually when we think of someone with incredible, fanatical will, we associate that with a massive ego. Think of the classic titans of industry. And if they're humble, we might think of them as being a bit meek or, not driven enough.
And that's the misconception this research just shatters. The will here isn't just working hard. It is a fanatical, almost terrifying, stoic drive to produce the best long-term results no matter how hard it is. But, and this is the key, the ambition is channeled entirely into the institution, not the self.
So they're incredibly ambitious, but they're ambitious for the company to win, not for themselves to be famous.
Exactly. They would be perfectly happy if no one ever knew their name as long as the company became an enduring great institution.
Can you give us a concrete example? Because humble but driven sounds nice on a leadership poster, but what does it actually look like in the wild?
The absolute archetype, and really the quiet hero of this first section of the book, is a man named Darwin Smith. He was the CEO of Kimberly-Clark. Now, be honest, had you ever heard of Darwin Smith before reading this research?
Never. Not once in my life. And I feel like I follow this stuff.
Most people haven't.
Yeah.
And that is exactly the point. Darwin Smith was the CEO of Kimberly-Clark for 20 years, from 1971 on. When he took over, the company was a stuffy, mediocre old paper company. Their stock had fallen 36% behind the general market over the previous 2 decades.
So a classic good company on the verge of becoming not so good.
Exactly. And who do they pick to lead them? Darwin Smith. He was the company's in-house lawyer. He was mild-mannered. He wore these thick, nerdy glasses. He was awkward socially. He wasn't some charismatic speaker who could rally the troops.
He doesn't sound like a titan of industry. He sounds like the guy who does your taxes.
Chuckles, he does.
Yeah.
But the board wasn't even sure he was the right choice. But then, shortly after taking the job, he makes this decision that is just bafflingly bold. This is the professional will side of the equation.
Okay.
He took a hard look at the business, and he confronted a brutal fact. Their core business, coated paper, was mediocre. The economics were bad. The competition was fierce. They would never, ever be the best in the world at it.
So their main business was a dead end.
But he saw this glimmer of potential in their small consumer products division. Things like Kleenex tissues and Huggies diapers.
Right, disposable diapers and tissues. A completely different game than industrial paper mills.
A brutal game, because it meant declaring all-out war on the undisputed king of consumer products, Procter & Gamble.
And P&G were the giants. They were the New York Yankees of consumer goods in the 70s. You just don't pick a fight with P&G and expect to win.
It was considered suicidal. So what does Smith do? He doesn't just, launch a pilot program or dip a toe in the water. He announces that he is going to sell the paper mills.
He sold the mills! But that was the history of the company. That was their identity, where they came from.
It was their history, their identity, and their main source of revenue. He sold the mills, the entire legacy business, to pour every dollar and all of their energy into a direct war with P&G. The business press called it a stupid move. Wall Street hated it. The stock crashed.
I can't even imagine the pressure. Your own board thinks you're quiet and unassuming, and then you make this giant company betting move and everyone tells you you're an idiot.
It takes a very specific, very quiet kind of iron will to stand there with the stock crashing and the analysts screaming and just calmly say, no, this is the right thing to do for the company in the long run. He didn't blink. He just executed.
And the result?
25 years later, Kimberly-Clark was the #1 paper-based consumer products company in the world. They owned the category. They beat P&G in 6 out of 8 product categories. They even bought out their old rival, Scott Paper. They won, flat out.
An incredible story, and yet Smith never wanted to be the hero of that story.
Never. He was famously modest. When a journalist asked him to describe his management style, he just kind of looked down and said, eccentric. In retirement, he summed up his entire 20-year tenure by saying, I never stopped trying to become qualified for the job.
That is the personal humility right there. It's almost a sense of service to the role rather than ownership of it.
It is service.
Mm-hmm.
And Collins develops this fantastic metaphor to describe this level 5 behavior, the window in the mirror. This is a great diagnostic tool for anyone listening right now, for yourself or for your boss.
I love this imagery. It's so simple and powerful. Break it down for us.
It's all about where you assign credit and where you assign blame. When things go well, when the company has a great quarter, when a product succeeds, a level 5 leader instinctively looks out the window.
What do they see out the window?
They see other people to credit. They point to the team. They point to their direct reports. They point to good luck. They point to fortunate market conditions. They say, look at these amazing people who made this happen. Weren't we lucky?
They don't stand in front of the mirror and admire themselves saying, I am a genius, my strategy was brilliant.
Exactly. They deflect credit. They make themselves smaller so that the team and the company can be bigger. The comparison leaders, the ones who ran the companies that failed to sustain greatness, they do the opposite. They look in the mirror when things go well. They preen. They take all the credit.
Okay, so that's for success. What happens when things go wrong? When there's a failure?
The dynamic flips completely. When things go wrong, when a project fails, when they miss their numbers, the level 5 leader looks in the mirror. They say, I am responsible. The buck stops here. I missed something. This is on me. They never, ever blame bad luck or the economy.
Whereas the mediocre level 4 leader looks out the window and says, oh, the market is down, or my team isn't executing properly, or the economy is in a recession. It's always someone else's fault.
Precisely. It's radical personal responsibility for failure and a radical sharing of credit for success. And you can imagine what that does for a culture. It builds immense trust and loyalty.
This brings up a really tough practical question, though. And the book touches on this. Can you learn to be a level 5? Or are you just sort of born with that wiring or not? Because if I have a big ego, and let's face it, most ambitious people who want to be CEOs have a healthy ego, am I just doomed to be a level 4 forever?
It's the essential question. And Collins is careful to say this is a hypothesis, not a proven fact from the data. But he suggests there are 2 broad categories of people. First, there are those who are just, constitutionally incapable of subjugating their ego to a cause larger than themselves.
Okay.
For them, work is always at its core about what they get, the fame, the fortune, the adulation. And those people, Collins argues, probably cannot evolve into level 5 leaders. Their ego is their operating system.
So that's the incurable group, so to speak.
But he believes that group is actually pretty small. The second, much larger group consists of people who have the potential for level 5 leadership inside them. Maybe it's buried under layers of cultural conditioning that told them they need to act like a tough, egocentric boss to get ahead.
Or they've been rewarded for that behavior their whole career.
Exactly. But under the right circumstances, with some deep self-reflection, a powerful mentor, or often a significant life event that humbles them, they can make the choice to evolve. They can learn to channel their ambition away from themselves.
So it's not about getting rid of ambition. It's about redirecting it. It's okay to be furiously ambitious, but you have to channel that fury into the work, into the company, not into the mirror.
That's the pivot. It's the crucial shift in mindset. You have to care more about the company winning than you care about being the one who gets the credit for the win.
All right, so we have our level 5 leader. We have this rare blend of humble and driven person at the helm. Now they need to start making moves. They need a strategy. So naturally, the next step is they sit down, lock themselves in a room for a week, and come out with a brilliant new vision statement, right?
Chuckles. You would think so.
Mm.
I mean, that is the standard MBA playbook, Chapter 1. But this is the second big surprise of the research, and maybe the most famous concept from the entire book. It's the principle of first who, then what.
First who, then what? Okay, I've definitely heard this one, but I feel like most people interpret this as just, a fancy way of saying hire good people.
It is so much more radical and specific than just hire good people. The conventional wisdom, the assumption, is that a new leader comes in and first sets a new vision. They say, we are going to take that hill. We are going west.
You pick the destination?
You pick the destination, the what, and then you get the crew. You hire people who are good at going west, people who are excited about the destination. Strategy first, people second.
Right, structure follows strategy.
Collins and his team found the exact opposite pattern in the good to great companies. The leaders who ignited these transformations, they started with who, not what. They said, in effect, look, I don't know where we should take this company yet, but I know that if I can get the right people on the bus with me and get the wrong people off the bus and get the right people in the right seats, then we'll figure out a way to make this company great.
This is the famous bus analogy.
Get the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus, and the right people in the right seats. And the crucial, counterintuitive part is that you do all of this before you figure out where to drive the bus.
Why is the order so critically important? It seems almost inefficient. Why hire a bunch of people before you know exactly what you want them to do?
There are a couple of massive reasons why the order matters so much. The first, and maybe the biggest, is adaptability. The world is unpredictable.
It's always changing.
Always. So if people join your bus because they are super excited about the destination, say, we're going to be the best typewriter company in the world. What happens when the world changes and you suddenly need to become a computer company?
They get off the bus. Or worse, they stay on the bus and complain that this isn't what they signed up for. You promised me typewriters.
Exactly. Their loyalty is to the what. But if they join because of who else is on the bus, because they want to work with this amazing group of people and they trust the driver, the level 5 leader, then they're adaptable. They say, okay, we're changing direction. Fine with me as long as I'm on this bus with this team. The who is the constant you can build on. The what is a variable.
That makes a lot of sense. What's the other big reason?
The other reason is motivation. If you have the right people on the bus, you don't need to spend your time and energy trying to manage and motivate them.
They're self-motivated.
They're self-motivated by an inner drive to produce results and be part of something great. The wrong people need to be tightly managed. The right people don't. You can focus all your energy on the actual work, not on, incentives and pep talks and trying to police people.
There's a great story about this in the book with Wells Fargo Bank.
Yeah, the CEO, Dick Cooley. This was back in the 70s, preparing for the deregulation of the banking industry. Now, you have to realize that banking back then was kind of a boring utility. The government set the rules. You couldn't really compete on price.
It was a very stable, very predictable world.
Very. But Cooley had this insight. He saw that the industry was going to undergo massive, unpredictable trauma when deregulation hit. But he didn't know exactly what form it would take.
Yeah.
He couldn't have a specific strategy because the rules of the game were about to be completely rewritten.
So his what was a giant question mark?
A giant question mark. So he didn't focus on strategy. He spent years focusing on who. He just went out and systematically recruited and trained the absolute best, most adaptable talent he could find in the industry, even if he didn't have a specific job for them yet.
He was basically hoarding talent, building a management army for a war he knew was coming but didn't know the shape of.
He was. People thought he was crazy.
Yeah.
But his whole philosophy was, that's how you build for the future. You get the best people. And when deregulation finally hit and the industry was thrown into chaos, Wells Fargo had, by far, the strongest, most adaptable management team. They thrived. Their comparison company, Bank of America, had a very specific strategy, but they didn't have the bench strength to pivot when that strategy inevitably became obsolete.
But this first two principle, it has a dark side, right? Or at least a very tough side. It's not just about getting people on the bus. It's about being just as diligent about getting the wrong people off the bus. That sounds harsh.
It can sound that way. It can sound unfeeling or cold. But Collins makes a really crucial distinction here that I think is important. You need to be rigorous, not ruthless.
Okay, what's the difference? Because to the person getting let go, it probably feels the same.
Well, to be ruthless is to hack and cut without careful consideration. It's, laying off 20% of the workforce just to make a quarterly number look better. That's chainsaw management. It destroys morale because it feels arbitrary and impersonal.
It's reactive.
It's reactive. To be rigorous, on the other hand, means having consistently high standards applied to everyone at all times, especially in the good times. It means being honest with people. It means acting to protect the high performers on your team. It's actually more fair in the long run.
The source material brings up something called Packard's Law.
Yes, from David Packard of Hewlett-Packard. He argued that no company can grow revenues consistently faster than its ability to get enough of the right people to implement that growth and still become a great company.
Say that again. That feels important.
No company can grow revenues faster than its ability to get the right people. Think about that. If your sales are growing by 50% a year, but you can only find and train 20% more right people, you're not actually winning. You are diluting your culture. You're putting the wrong people on the bus just to keep up, and you will eventually stagnate and become mediocre.
So rigor means being disciplined about hiring and also about firing. Collins offers 3 very practical disciplines for this. I want to go through them one by one because they're so actionable for anyone listening who manages people.
They're great tests.
Number 1 is, when in doubt, don't hire. Keep looking.
This is probably the hardest one for managers to follow in the real world. Imagine you have an open seat on your team. The team is overworked. You're stressed. You're behind on your goals. You interview someone who is. Okay, they're not a superstar, but they can do the job. They check the
The
boxes.
temptation to just hire them and plug the hole is immense.
It's overwhelming. And the good to great companies had the discipline to say, do not hire them. Wait, keep looking.
Because a mediocre person in that seat is actually worse than an empty seat.
Yes. 1,000 times yes. Because the cost of a hiring mistake is astronomical.
Yeah.
It's not just their salary. It's the management time you'll spend supervising them, the energy the best people will spend correcting their mistakes, the opportunities you'll miss. Great companies would rather leave a seat empty and have their A players stretch to cover the gap than fill it with a B player who will drain everyone's energy.
Okay, that's a tough one. Number 2, when you know you need to make a people change, act.
This is the one that really hits home for most managers, I think. We all procrastinate on this. We know someone isn't right for the role, but we delay. We think, oh, maybe they'll get better, or maybe it's my fault. Maybe I'm not explaining it right. We hope the problem will solve itself.
It never does.
It never does. And Collins offers a fantastic diagnostic test for this. He says, the moment you feel the need to tightly manage someone, you've probably made a hiring mistake.
Ouch. Wow. The moment you need to tightly manage someone, that hits me right in the chest. That's a powerful filter.
Isn't it? Think about your absolute best employees, the true A players. Do you manage them? No. You guide them. You mentor them. You collaborate with them. But you don't check their work every hour. You don't worry if they're actually working when they're at home.
You trust them.
You trust them. If you find you're spending all your emotional energy trying to drag performance out of someone, they are the wrong person for that seat on the bus. And keeping them there isn't just bad for the company.
It's unfair to the other people.
It's deeply unfair to the right people. Because the right people on the bus inevitably end up carrying the load and cleaning up the messes for the wrong people. And eventually your bait people will get frustrated and leave because they want to work with other great people. The rigorous leader acts not to be cruel, but to be fair to everyone who's doing great work.
Okay, and the third and final practical discipline here.
This one is really counterintuitive. Put your best people on your biggest opportunities, not your biggest problems.
See, that is the opposite of what most companies do. The standard playbook is you take your star performer, your fixer, and you say, go fix this mess we have. Go save this failing division.
Right. We send our best soldiers to fight our toughest battles. The good to great companies had a different logic. They said, no, we're going to starve or sell off the failing division, the problem. We're going to put our star performer on the new division that has the potential to grow tenfold.
That goes right back to the Kimberly-Clark example. Darwin Smith sold the mills, the big problem, but he kept the best managers from the mills and moved them over to the consumer division, the big opportunity.
Exactly. Problems don't have infinite upside. Opportunities do. You can only fix a problem back to zero. But a great opportunity can go to infinity. Don't waste your best people just getting back to even.
Now, I want to quickly contrast this first Who team approach with what the comparison companies tended to do. Collins describes a very different and ultimately fragile model that he calls the genius with 1,000 helpers.
This is such a common trap, especially for founder-led companies. You have one brilliant visionary leader, a genius. They come up with a brilliant strategy, And then they hire an army of capable helpers to execute their vision.
And this can work, right, for a while at least.
Well, it can work spectacularly for a long time. Look at Henry Ford. But the helpers aren't being trained to think, to debate, to lead. They're being trained to follow orders. They're extensions of the genius's brain. So what happens when the genius leaves or retires or dies or just loses their touch?
The whole thing collapses. The organization has no brain of its own. The helpers don't know how to lead.
The company collapses. The good to great model is a team of strong leaders, led by a level 5, who debate and argue rigorously to find the best path forward. It's probably louder. It's definitely messier.
But it's robust. It's not dependent on one person. And when you have that team of strong people, you can finally get to the truth.
You can, and you have to.
Which leads us perfectly into the next major section. We have our level 5 leader. We have the right people on the bus. Now we can finally move into the disciplined thought phase. And this all starts with confronting reality. The chapter is called Confront the Brutal Facts, Yet Never Lose Faith.
This segment is built around what Collins calls the Stockdale paradox. And this is, honestly, one of the most powerful and moving parts of the entire book. It really transcends business. It's a life philosophy.
Tell us the story. Who was Admiral Stockdale?
Admiral Jim Stockdale was the highest-ranking U.S. military officer in the infamous Hanoi Hilton prisoner of war camp during the Vietnam War. And we have to be clear, this wasn't just a prison. This was a torture camp.
Right.
He was held there for 8 years. He was tortured over 20 times. He had no prisoner's rights, no release date, and no certainty that he would ever see his family again. He lived day to day with the real possibility of death.
It's an almost unimaginable situation. The psychological strain alone, the hopelessness would break most people.
It did break most people. And Collins got the chance to interview him for the book. He asked him, how did you survive that? But then he asked a more interesting question. Who didn't make it out?
And you'd expect him to say, you know, the weak ones or the ones who got sick.
Exactly. But Stockdale's answer was immediate and certain. He said, oh, that's easy. The optimists.
The optimist. That just stops you in your tracks. I mean, we are told our entire lives that optimism is the key to survival. Keep your chin up. Look on the bright side. How could the optimists be the ones who didn't make it?
And here's the crucial nuance that Stockdale explained. He said the optimists were the ones who would say, we're going to be out by Christmas. And Christmas would come and Christmas would go. Then they'd say, we're going to be out by Easter, and Easter would come and Easter would go, and Thanksgiving, and then it would be Christmas again. And they died of a broken heart.
Wow. So their hope was tied to a specific timeline, a specific expectation that wasn't grounded in reality, and the constant disappointment just wore them down and broke their spirit.
Exactly. Their optimism was a form of denial. Stockdale distinguished this from what he did to survive. He said, and this is the core of the paradox, you must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end, which you can never ever afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they might be.
He accepted the reality of his situation. He accepted he might be there for 5 more years. He accepted he might be tortured again tomorrow. He confronted the brutal fact of it. But he never, ever lost the faith that he would eventually get home and turn it into the defining event of his life.
That is the paradox. You have to hold both of those ideas in your head at the same time. Unwavering faith in the endgame and unblinking confrontation with the brutal reality of the now.
And in a business context, this is so vital. If you ignore the brutal facts, if you ignore that the market is shifting or that your flagship product is becoming obsolete or that your competitor is eating your lunch all because you're being optimistic, you will fail.
You're the guy who's going to die of broken heart. You have to look the data right in the eye. You have to look at the redness of the balance sheet and not flinch.
Collins connects this directly to the story of 2 grocery giants from that era, Kroger and A&P.
It's a perfect case study. Back in the 1970s, the entire grocery world was changing. The old-style small neighborhood grocery store was dying. The future was the superstore, a much bigger store with a huge selection, a pharmacy, a bakery, everything under one roof.
Okay, so the trend was clear.
The trend was clear. Both Kroger and A&P saw the exact same data. They both knew it. The brutal facts were available to everyone. But their responses were polar opposites. A&P, which had been the dominant chain for decades, tried to ignore it. They loved their old model. It was their heritage, their identity. They basically put their head in the sand.
They were the optimists. This is just fad. It'll be better by Christmas. People will come back to the classic small store.
Exactly. They were so in denial, they actually did an experiment. They opened one single modern superstore called the Golden Key, and it was wildly, unbelievably successful. It proved the new model worked. And do you know what the A&P management team did?
I have a bad feeling about this.
They shut it down.
Why?
That makes absolutely no sense. It was working.
Because the executive said, it is cannibalizing sales from our other older stores nearby. They didn't want to confront the brutal fact that their entire existing fleet of stores was obsolete, so they killed the future to protect the past.
Unbelievable. What did Kroger do?
Kroger confronted the brutal fact head on. Their leadership team said, the old grocery store model is dead, and we have hundreds of them. So systematically, city by city, they began replacing every single one of their old stores with the new superstore concept. They completely remade the company from the inside out.
That must have been incredibly painful and expensive for Kroger to do that in the short term. It was. It crushed their earnings for several years. It was messy. It was hard. But because they confronted reality, they emerged as the #1 grocery chain in America. A&P, the deniers, shrank into irrelevance and eventually filed for bankruptcy.
So the big question for any leader listening is, how do you create a culture where these brutal facts can actually be heard? Because in most hierarchies, people are afraid to tell the boss the bad news. We've all been in that meeting where everyone nods in agreement, even though they know the project is on fire.
Right, the truth gets filtered as it goes up the chain. Collins identifies 4 basic practices to create what he calls a climate of truth.
Okay, let's hear them.
First, lead with questions, not answers. Don't come into a meeting and say, here is the strategy. A level 5 leader comes in and asks, so what's on your mind? What should we be worried about? Why are our sales down in this region? They act like Socrates. They probe and question until the truth emerges.
Okay, that's number 1. Second, engage in dialogue and debate, not coercion. The meetings should feel like a heated scientific debate to find the truth, not a lecture where the boss dictates. It should get loud. People should argue passionately for their positions based on evidence. Conduct autopsies without blame. When something goes wrong, a product fails, a deal falls through, you analyze it deeply, not to find a scapegoat to fire, but to understand the systemic cause. If people think they will be shot for bringing bad news, you will never, ever hear the bad news until it's far too late.
And the last one.
Fourth, build red flag mechanisms. These are systems or processes that force you to pay attention to data that you might otherwise want to ignore. For example, a rule that says any customer who cancels a contract over a certain size automatically triggers a call from the CEO. You can't ignore that red flag.
Okay, so this is all part of disciplined thought. We have disciplined people confronting the brutal facts. Now we need a simple guiding concept to cut through all the complexity. And this is where we meet the animal kingdom again. We move from the bus to the hedgehog. The hedgehog concept. This is probably the second most famous idea from the book, and it's based on an ancient Greek parable that says, the fox knows many things, but the hedgehog knows one big thing.
The fox is cunning, it's fast, it tries a million different strategies to attack the hedgehog.
And the hedgehog, no matter what the fox does, it does the same thing every time. It just curls up into a tight, spiky ball, and the hedgehog wins every single time.
So in the business world, the foxes are the comparison companies. They're scattered, they're diffused, they're trying to do a million things at once. They launch a product here, they make an acquisition there, they're constantly chasing trends.
And the hedgehogs are the good to great companies. They simplify a complex world into a single organizing idea. One crystal clear concept that unifies everything they do.
But, and this is it's not just any simple concept. It's not a mission statement you write over a weekend retreat. It's not a slogan. It has to be a deep understanding that is found at the intersection of 3 circles.
This is the most technical part of the framework, but it's also the most powerful. A hedgehog concept is not something you invent. It's something you discover.
Yeah.
And you discover it by asking 3 very specific questions. You have to find where the answers to these 3 questions overlap.
Okay, what's the first circle?
Circle 1. What can you be the best in the world at?
And circle 2.
What drives your economic engine?
And the third.
What are you deeply passionate about?
Okay, let's drill into that first one because it's tricky. What can you be the best in the world at? That sounds almost arrogant. We're the best.
It's not about arrogance. It's about a cold, sober, honest assessment of potential. And the distinction Collins makes here is absolutely crucial. It's not what you want to be the best at. It's not even what you're currently competent at. It's what you understand you have the potential to actually be the #1 best at.
That's a huge distinction.
It's everything. Collins calls it transcending the curse of competence. Just because you've been doing something for a long time and you're good at it doesn't mean you can be the best at it. And if you can't be the best, you shouldn't build your company around it.
Give us an example of that.
Abbott Laboratories is the perfect one. For most of their history, they were a pharmaceutical company, and they're a pretty good one. But they confronted a brutal fact. They could never, ever be the best pharmaceutical company in the world.
Why not?
Because they couldn't beat Merck. Merck's R&D machine, their pure science, was just on another level. So if Abbott stayed in the game of pure pharmaceutical innovation, they would always be number 3 or number 4. They'd be a good company, but never a great one.
So they had to find a different game to play.
They had to find a game they could win. So Abbott pivoted. They looked at their skills and realized what they could be the best in the world at was creating a portfolio of products that help make healthcare more cost-effective. Things like medical diagnostics, hospital nutritionals, generic drugs. They moved away from competing with Merck on innovation and into a new category of cost management products. And their value just exploded.
So they had the discipline to walk away from something they were competent at because they knew they couldn't be the best.
Exactly. If you're building your strategy around something you can never be the best at, you are just working for the sake of working. You will never build a great self-sustaining flywheel.
Okay, let's move to circle 2. What drives your economic engine? This sounds like it's about the math.
It is. It's about finding the single metric, the one denominator, that has the biggest and most sustainable impact on your long-term profitability. It's usually expressed as profit per X.
Profit per X. Can you give an example of that?
Walgreens is the classic. For most retail companies, the standard economic denominator was profit per store. It seems logical, right? You want each of your stores to be as profitable as possible.
Makes sense to me.
But Walgreens realized that focusing on profit per store would lead them to make bad decisions. It would lead them to favor cheaper real estate in the middle of a block to lower their costs. Instead, after much debate, they shifted their core metric to profit per customer visit.
How does that one little change in the denominator change behavior?
Think about it. If your goal is to maximize profit per customer visit, what do? You do everything possible to increase convenience and make it easy for people to visit. You want high density. You want a Walgreens on every busy corner, not in the middle of the block. You want drive-through pharmacies.
So you're willing to pay for more expensive corner real estate.
Exactly. This insight changed everything for them. It led directly to their famous clustering strategy, putting 9 stores within a 1-mile radius in some cities. It looked crazy from a profit per store perspective, but from a profit per customer visit perspective, it was genius. It made them ubiquitous and drove a massive flywheel of growth.
A subtle but absolutely massive shift in strategy. And finally, circle 3. What are you deeply passionate about?
This one is tricky because you can't fake it. You can't manufacture passion. You can't just tell your employees, okay, team, starting Monday, we're all going to be deeply passionate about coded paper. It doesn't work.
Laughs, right?
The good to great leaders didn't try to motivate people with charismatic speeches. They found what their people were already passionate about and then built the company around that. For Gillette, for example, they were irrationally deeply passionate about the science of shaving systems. They were absolute geeks about razor blade technology.
And if you don't truly love it, you'll never have the will to stick with it long enough to push through the hardships and become the best.
Precisely. You need all 3 circles to overlap. If you have passion and you can be the best at something, but there's no economic engine, you have a hobby, not a business.
Right.
If you can be the best at it and has great economics, but you have no passion for it, you'll eventually burn out and your best people will leave. And if you have passion in economics, but you can't be the best, you'll always be mediocre, and a competitor who can be the best will eventually crush you. You have to find that sweet spot, that intersection.
And finding that hedgehog concept, it's not some overnight aha moment, is it?
No, absolutely not. The research showed it's an iterative process that takes years. Collins describes a mechanism they found in these companies called the council. It's a group of 5 to 12 of the right people on the bus who meet regularly for months or years just to debate these 3 circles.
So it's a long, slow process of discovery.
It is. They ask questions, they argue, they look at the data, they confront the brutal facts, and they slowly converge on the answer. The book says it took these companies an average of 4 years to clarify their hedgehog concept.
4 years of debate. That requires immense patience and discipline.
Which brings us perfectly to the final stage of the framework, disciplined action. Once you have your hedgehog concept, You need the discipline to stick to it and execute it flawlessly.
A culture of discipline. Now, when I hear the word discipline, my mind immediately goes to a drill sergeant. I think of top-down control, lots of rules, bureaucracy, punching a time clock.
And that's exactly what the comparison companies often had. They had what you might call disciplinary cultures, often forced by a tyrannical, micromanaging CEO. But that's not what Collins is talking about. The good to great companies had a true culture of discipline. It was internal, not external.
What's the formula for that?
The formula is beautiful in its simplicity. If you have disciplined people, from step 1, you don't need hierarchy. If you have disciplined thought, from step 2, you don't need bureaucracy. If you combine those with disciplined action, you don't need excessive control.
So it's actually about creating more freedom, not less. It's freedom within a framework.
Exactly. Collins calls it freedom and responsibility within a framework. The hedgehog concept is the strict, clear framework. But within that framework, people have enormous freedom and responsibility to act, to take initiative, to fulfill their objectives.
There's a bizarre but really memorable story in this chapter about rinsing your cottage cheese.
Chuckles, yes, the Dave Scott story. This is probably my favorite little anecdote in the whole book because it captures the mindset perfectly. Dave Scott was a 6-time Ironman triathlon winner, an absolute machine of an athlete.
Just a legend of the sport.
A legend.
Yeah.
He would bike 75 miles, swim 20,000 meters, and run 17 miles, like as a normal day of training. But the detail that stuck out to the researcher profiling him was his diet. He would actually take his cottage cheese and wash it under water to rinse off any tiny bit of excess fat.
That sounds awful. That sounds completely obsessive and miserable.
It sounds obsessive to us because we don't share his goal.
Mm.
But the point is, Dave Scott didn't see it as a sacrifice. He didn't see it as a hardship. To him, it was just what you do if your hedgehog concept is to be the best Ironman in the world. It was a natural, disciplined action in service of his goal.
So in good to great companies, people demonstrate this rinsing the cottage cheese mentality. They go to these extreme lengths to fulfill their responsibilities, not because the boss is watching them, but because they have this intense internal standard of excellence.
And a huge part of this culture of discipline is knowing what not to do.
The stop doing list.
Exactly. Most companies and most people have to-do lists that are a mile long. They're constantly adding new initiatives, new projects. They try to do everything. Great companies have stopped doing lists. They have the discipline to rigorously cut anything and everything that does not fit squarely within their 3 circles.
It takes more discipline to say no to a good opportunity that's outside your hedgehog than to say yes.
Infinitely more. There's a fantastic example of this from Nucor, the steel company. Nucor's hedgehog concept was all about being the lowest cost steel producer in the world, using mini-mill technology and motivating their workforce with an egalitarian culture and performance-based pay. Everything they did had to align with that.
So what was on their stop doing list?
They stopped doing all the normal corporate perks that create class distinctions. There were no executive dining rooms, no company planes for the executives, no fancy corporate headquarters. And my favorite one, no reserved parking spots for the CEO.
Wait, no reserved parking for the CEO?
No. The CEO of Nucor said that if he got to work late, he had to park in the back of the lot just like everyone else. They stopped doing the visible trappings of hierarchy. This wasn't just to save a few bucks. It was a disciplined action to reinforce their culture, that we are all in this together to be the low-cost producer.
That takes immense discipline for an executive team to say no to those kinds of perks.
It really does. It's so much easier to say yes. And that discipline, that focus, leads us perfectly into the next accelerator of greatness, technology.
Technology accelerators. This segment is so incredibly relevant today with AI and everything else happening. And we have to remember this research was conducted right through the peak of the dot-com bubble. So they had a front row seat to a massive tech frenzy.
They did. And the finding they came away with is so stark and so important for you to hear today. Technology is never the primary cause of greatness.
Whoa. Okay, say that again. In this day and age, that sounds like heresy. Technology doesn't make you great.
No. Technology, Collins argues, is an accelerator of momentum, not a creator of it. If you have a well-oiled machine, a clear hedgehog concept, and a culture of discipline, then the right technology can help you accelerate and become great faster. But if you're a mess, technology will only accelerate your failure.
He uses the great comparison of drugstore.com versus Walgreens.
A perfect example from that era. In the late 90s, drugstore.com launched. They had all the new tech. They had all the Silicon Valley hype. Their stock went to the moon on day one. They were going to disrupt the old-fashioned pharmacy business forever.
And Walgreens at the time was seen as a dinosaur. The analysts were screaming at them, why don't you have a big internet strategy? You're too slow. You're going to be left behind.
And what did Walgreens do? They didn't panic. They paused. They used their disciplined process. They crawled, then they walked, then they ran. They asked the question, how can this new internet technology fit our hedgehog concept of being the most convenient drugstore?
So they applied a filter.
A very specific filter. And they realized that just selling drugs online, like drugstore.com, didn't fully align with their model. Their model was about the convenient access and the relationship between the local pharmacist and the customer. So what did they do? They built a website, but they integrated deeply with their physical stores. You could order a prescription online and pick it up an hour later at the drive-thru. They used technology to make their existing hedgehog concept better.
They used it to accelerate their convenience flywheel.
Exactly. Drugstore.com, which had no clear business model other than internet, eventually crashed and burned. Walgreens, once they applied the technology thoughtfully, blew past everyone and became even more dominant. The rule is simple. If a technology fits your hedgehog, you should become a pioneer in it. If it doesn't, you can ignore it or just match parity with your competitors.
And the key is that mediocre companies react to new technology out of fear, the fear of being left behind. Great companies react with thoughtfulness.
It's a reaction of fear versus a response of discipline.
This all brings us to the grand unifying theory of the book, the image that ties all these pieces together, the flywheel.
The flywheel and the doom loop. This concept really captures the physics of how this transformation feels from the inside versus how it looks from the outside.
People on the outside, the journalists and the Wall Street analysts, they look at the stock charts of these companies like Circuit City or Nucor, and they see the chart go flat, flat, flat for years. And then suddenly, boom, it goes vertical. It looks like a hockey stick. And they think, what was the miracle moment? What was the one big decision, the killer innovation that caused that breakthrough?
And when you go and ask the people who are inside the company, the executives, the managers, they're always baffled by that question. They say, there was no miracle moment. There was no single thing.
So how do they describe it?
They describe it as turning a giant, heavy flywheel. Imagine a massive 5,000-pound metal flywheel, mounted horizontally on an axle. Your job is to get it spinning. You put your shoulder to it and you push with all your might. And for a long, long time, it barely moves. Maybe 1 inch.
It's a grind.
It's an incredible grind. You keep pushing. Finally, after a huge effort, it makes 1 full, slow rotation. You keep pushing, it makes 2 turns, then 4, then 8. You're not pushing any harder, but the momentum is starting to build on itself.
Right. The wheel's own weight starts to help you.
Exactly. You keep pushing in that same consistent direction, and eventually you reach a point of breakthrough. The wheel is spinning so fast that its own momentum is driving it forward. That is the flywheel effect.
And each of those early pushes is one of the things we've been talking about.
It's getting the right people on the bus. That's a push. It's confronting the brutal facts. That's another push. It's discovering your hedgehog concept. Push. It's creating a culture of discipline. Push. It's the accumulation of all that effort in one consistent direction that builds unstoppable momentum.
And the opposite of the flywheel is the dreaded doom loop.
The doom loop is what the comparison companies were stuck in. They were impatient. They wanted the breakthrough without the long, slow buildup.
They wanted a miracle moment.
They wanted a miracle. So a new CEO comes in. He launches a big new grand program. He gives it a fancy name. He pushes the flywheel hard in one direction. It doesn't yield immediate, dramatic results, of course. So he gets impatient. He stops. He fires people. He changes direction. Okay, now we're doing this. And he pushes the flywheel the other way.
You never build momentum. You just lurch back and forth, exhausting everyone and going nowhere.
You go nowhere. And acquisitions play a huge role here, too. The research showed that the good to great companies use big acquisitions after their flywheel was already spinning fast as a way to accelerate it even more. The mediocre companies use big acquisitions as a desperate attempt to create momentum.
Oh, our business is failing. Let's just go buy a competitor.
And it never works. 2 mediocrities joined together just makes one big, complicated mediocrity.
So we've covered the entire framework. Disciplined people, starting with a level 5 leader and getting the right people on the bus. Disciplined thought, confronting the brutal facts and finding your hedgehog concept. And disciplined action, building a culture of discipline and turning that flywheel push by push. But as we start to wrap up, I have to ask the question that Collins asks at the very end of the book. Why bother?
It's a profound final question.
I mean, this sounds like incredibly hard work. It sounds exhausting to be this rigorous all the time, to constantly confront brutal facts, to rinse your cottage cheese. Why not just be good? Good pays the bills.
It's a fair question. Why go through all this pain? And Collins answers it not with a business case, but with a story about a high school cross-country coach.
Okay.
This coach took a consistently losing high school team and turned it into a perennial state champion by applying all of these same principles. And when Collins asked him, why do you go to all this trouble? They're just kids. The coach didn't talk about the trophies or the glory.
What did he talk about?
He talked about the quality of the experience. He said, in effect, that for him, it's really about the fact that work is a huge part of your life. And if you could spend that huge part of your life working with people you love and respect, first too, on something you are deeply passionate about, Hedgehog, and you get to experience the profound satisfaction of doing it with excellence and seeing tangible results, that is the recipe for a great life.
So it's not just about the money or the stock price. It's about not wasting your one shot at life on mediocrity.
Exactly. Collins argues that it is actually more stressful and more exhausting to be mediocre. It's psychologically draining to work with the wrong people. It's incredibly draining to lurch from crisis to crisis in the doom loop. Building a great flywheel and feeling that momentum take over actually generates energy. It's joyful.
And just to close the loop, there's a direct connection here to his first book, Built to Last, right? This isn't a replacement for that.
It's not. The way to think about it is that Good to Great is the prequel. You use the Good to Great principles to build the engine and get the flywheel spinning. Then you use the Built to Last principles, like having a core purpose beyond just making money, to keep that flywheel spinning for 50 or 100 years to build an enduring institution.
So as we close out, here is the challenge for you, the listener. Whether you are running a Fortune 500 company or a small team of 5, or you're just trying to manage your own career,
It applies to all of them.
look in the mirror. Are you a level 5 leader in your own domain? Are you looking out the window when things go well and in the mirror when they go poorly? Look at your bus. Do you have the right people in the right seats? Are you rigorous or are you ruthless?
Do you have a stop doing list? Or are you just adding more and more to your plate?
And maybe the most important question of all, are you turning a flywheel, making consistent, disciplined progress every single day? Or are you, if you're being honest with yourself, stuck in a doom loop, lurching from one new program to the next, hoping for a miracle that will never come?
Because the ultimate lesson of this book, the one that should keep you up at night, is that the enemy of great is not bad. The enemy of great is good.
Don't settle for good. Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time.